It's always a pleasure to be on the platform of hellomyyoga to share some thoughts. So my thanks to hellomyyoga, particularly Shivani ji, for making this happen. I am told to share some ideas on this topic of being your own holistic therapist. This seems to be one topic, but within this one topic, there are so many topics. In the first place, let's get the topic clear. Being your own yoga therapist, your own means that you refers to a yoga sadhaka or a practitioner or a yoga teacher or a yoga therapist. So how a yoga practitioner, teacher, therapist can be a holistic therapist for himself or herself? That is one point of view. The second point of view is holism, holistic therapist. Yoga, in essence, is holistic. And when we say holistic or understand the term holism, in very simple terms, it means one has to understand the whole for understanding the parts. And the whole is always more than the summation of the parts. Every individual should be considered as unified whole in the social and natural environment in which he or she finds herself. When it comes to therapy, it means dealing with the person more than the person's ailment, dealing with the causes more than dealing with the symptoms. This term holism gets into proper perspective when we contrast it with what is called as reductionism. In reductionism, a complex or a complicated thing is understood by breaking it into parts, by analyzing its details. And when we understand the smallest part, we say, okay, we have understood the whole. Every science is reductionist in its nature. It analyzes. It is analytic. Whereas when you take yoga, yoga is synthetic. It synthesizes. It considers the whole person in totality. So that is the meaning of holism. When we come to therapy or a therapist, holistic therapist, the therapy is also holistic when it considers all the angles of therapy. For me, therapy has got 4 dimensions. One is prevention, one is curing, one is healing, one is transforming. Most of the therapies deal only with the curing part, ignoring or neglecting the other 3 parts, which is prevention, healing, and transforming. Yoga as a therapy has the promise to cater to all the 4 dimensions. So yoga therapy itself is holistic. It deals holistically with the person, and itself it is holistic. And a cheeky part to the topic, being your own holistic therapist, and if I add the latter part of this sentence, being your own holistic therapist before you do therapy for somebody else. I am reminded of Sigmund Freud, the father of modern psychoanalysis, who made a statement that before you start psychoanalyzing any person, you have to first psychoanalyze yourself. Very much essential. Only then you are in a position of analyzing some other person. In the same sense, a yoga therapist particularly has to first experience yoga, the practices, the philosophy, the outlook towards life, the lifestyle, before he or she can administer therapy to somebody else. This is unique as far as yoga is concerned. And in this context, what I'm talking will be very clear in a cheeky manner. When you consider two scenarios, try to visualize two situations. One situation in which a very short-tempered person is giving a lecture on how to have a calm and peaceful mind through mind control techniques of yoga. I repeat, a very short-tempered person giving a lecture, elaborating upon how to have a calm and peaceful mind through mind control techniques of yoga. First scenario. In the second scenario, try to visualize a fat, overweight, obese person making a colorful PowerPoint presentation of research evidencing the efficacy of yoga practices for reducing weight and obesity. Definitely there is some anomaly here. One who is short-tempered person giving a lecture on mind control, and one very obese person talking about research of how yoga practices can bring down weight and obesity. On the face of it, automatically there is an anomaly there. And this anomaly can be seen when we consider a situation wherein a Guru Shishya Parampara, a disciple or a Shishya, is asking proofs to the Guru when the Guru gives advices. Can you give me some proof? Yeah. No, that doesn't happen, because the quest for evidence, all reasoning, all logical arguments end at the doors of experience. Once you have experienced something, you don't require any proof for it. You are a living proof. In the same manner, in yoga, once you have experienced the beneficial effects of yoga practices, you don't require proofs of those practices. You automatically become a therapist. You can say with conviction what practices you do for getting what benefits. This is the uniqueness of yoga practice. I mean, to give a crude example, an allopathic doctor, when he or she prescribes Saridon for headache, he or she need not have taken a Saridon for prescribing, because he or she knows the chemical composition of that tablet and knows what the tablet does chemically to the brain and how the headache can go. So without experiencing the tablet can be prescribed. Without going through some surgery, a surgery can be done. In yoga, it does not happen that way. Yoga is an experiential subject. You have to go through the practices yourself, experience it, then you are in a position to prescribe and practice and treat people there. This is the uniqueness of yoga therapies. Coming to holistic therapy, I am trying to take 2-3 points in this topic, holistic therapy, as far as yoga is concerned. All of us know that yoga is one of the Astika darshanas in Indian philosophy. One of the 6 Astika darshanas, 6 orthodox philosophies of ancient India. One of the Shada darshanas. Yeah. Mimamsa, Vedanta, Nyaya, Vaishika, Sankhya being the other 5. Yoga is the 6th classical orthodox Indian philosophies. And add to these 3 Nastika philosophies, Buddhism, Jainism, and Charvaka. Out of these 9 philosophies, Charvakas are considered as the black sheep. So whenever we talk about all Indian philosophies, we say all philosophies except Charvaka. So in the context in which I'm talking about, all ancient Indian philosophies except Charvakas, all of them start with only one practical goal. And that practical goal is the removal of dukkha or sufferings in human life. Dukkha or sufferings in human life is inevitable, is a given fact. It is not like what it seems. Indian philosophy is very pessimistic. It starts with dukkha. No, it's not pessimism, it is realism. Because one cannot ignore, neglect, or say that there is dukkha is not there. If you take Buddhism, the 4 noble truths of Buddhism, the first noble truth starts with dukkha. Dukkha, dukkha samudaya, dukkha nirodha marga. So the fact of sufferings is there. Nobody can deny it. It's a realism. This dukkha encompasses all the ailments of the body and the mind in which we are talking about therapy. There cannot be a more holistic approach to therapy than attempts to remove all the sufferings from human life. So to begin with, all Indian philosophies, including Yoga Darshana, is a holistic therapy because the only goal is to remove dukkha or sufferings from human life. To go slightly deeper, this dukkha is provided by the body and the mind. The body goes through 5 processes: birth, growth, disease, decay, death. All 5 are painful. The mind is afflicted by the 6 enemies of the mind: kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. Lust, greed, anger, jealousy, ego, attachment. 6 enemies of the mind. Whosoever be the human being, irrespective of caste, creed, race, region, religion, from the time human race has come to this earth till today, these afflictions are there for all human beings. The degree may be different. And when we say afflictions, it automatically means it gives you pain. Patanjali says in the 2nd chapter, Sadhana Pada, Parinama Tapa Samskara Dukkhahi Gunavritti Virodhacha Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekina. For a person who has seen the truth, Vivekina, who has realized the difference between the eternal and the temporal, between Purusha and Prakriti, between Atman and the world, who has seen through the veil of illusion, when that person looks at the empirical world, he says everything is painful there for valid reasons. Parinama Tapa Samskara. Parinama means change. All the time things are changing. Change is painful. And you are helpless at that. Samskara, every action that you do, you generate impressions of those actions, which keep on conditioning and coloring your mind and influence your further actions. Till the time the samskaras are removed, you are caught in the chain of birth, death, rebirth cycle. If you talk about joys and delights, yes, there are joys and delights, but every joy and delight at the end of the day ends in suffering. Because when you enjoy certain thing, you either become a victim of craving for it more and more. Either it becomes a habit or you become addicted to it. If you don't get it, you get angry, you get jealous. and the whole change starts happening. So whatever delight, joy you take, all of them are also subjected to the economic law of diminishing marginal utility. When you are very thirsty, the first glass of water is very quenching. The second glass of water less quenching. Third very less. Fourth you don't require. All the pleasures, sensory pleasures, empirical pleasures, according to Indian philosophy, are subjected to this law. In course of time, they become mundane. So, the fact of sufferings cannot be denied. And all Indian philosophies aim towards removing this dukkha, these sufferings. In fact, because we are in yoga and Sankhya, on which yoga is based, Sankhya gives still more elaborate descriptions of this dukkha. It's very topical to what we are discussing today, that this dukkha comes from three sources: Adhyatmic, Adibhautik, Adidevik. Adhyatmic means your mind, body giving you a problem. Adibhautik means the source or cause of your pain is outside you, but the natural world. Adidevik means the source is outside you, but supernatural world. And Sankhya says for all these three sources of pain, remedies were available even in ancient India. If your body and mind gives you trouble, for the body, there was Ayurveda as a therapy. For the mind, there were so many sources of entertainment, relaxation, diversion. If external world is giving you a problem, you could have fortresses around you. You had law and order, which will ensure that no pain comes from external world. If the sources are external to you, but disembodied spirits are giving you a problem, then there was mantras, there were gems, incantations, which generated positive energy around you, preventing negative energy to come towards you. So remedies were available even in ancient India. Then why Sankhya and Yoga should think about another remedy? Why another holistic remedy? Because what Sankhya says is relevant even today. Sankhya, in fact, is the oldest of Indian philosophies, at least 2,600 years back, 2,700 years back, because even the historical Buddha in the 5th century BC learned under Sankhya scholars. So we can tell with assurance that Sankhya is at least 2,600 years old, if not more. The drawbacks of these remedies of ancient India was that Sankhya says very nicely that the diagnosis was never perfect. And second, the solution was never permanent. It's a matter of tremendous coincidence that despite medical science having developed so much in modern times, even today, diagnosis is never perfect. And also, solution or remedy is never permanent. We are seeing for ourselves, even in present time, even after taking 2 vaccinations along with the booster dose, still people get affected by coronavirus. It's never a permanent solution. And people who have got chicken pox, the chicken pox is a ailment of childhood. That is what we are told. But adults also get chicken pox. And we are told once you get vaccinated for chicken pox, there is no chance of you getting it. But there are so many individuals who get again and again chicken pox. Remedy is never permanent. I often repeat a very crude example of common cold and cough. We are told you take medicines, your cold and cough will go in 7 days. If you don't take medicines, it goes in 1 week. And it is not only that it goes in 1 week or 7 days, it comes back in 1 week. It's never permanent. This is the problem. Now, if you look at therapy of yoga from a holistic nature, the topic for today, the entire Sankhya philosophy backed by yoga practices, is meant for arriving at a perfect diagnosis of our problems, of our suffering. And once the perfect diagnosis is there, a permanent solution. You cannot find a more comprehensive therapy than yoga philosophy, Sankhya philosophy, or any other Indian philosophies except Charvaka. It is the ultimate therapy, the most holistic therapy, because in the darshana itself, therapy is inherent or inbuilt. And it is therapy for all sufferings, not only diabetes or hypertension or small sufferings like this. It's a total therapy for all sufferings, all pain in human life. If you take Sankhya, Sankhya is referred to as, Sankhya is understood as samakhyati. Samakhyati means right knowledge. If human sufferings are inevitable, a realism, then what is the perfect diagnosis? Why these sufferings? And all Indian philosophies, of course, except Charvakas, unanimously state that the sufferings are because of avidya or ignorance. The definition and description of avidya may be different in different philosophies, but the fact remains that it is your ignorance of reality, R capital, because of which you are suffering in life. And when you understand samakhyati, right knowledge, right realization, that right realization is what eliminates avidya or ignorance, and with that, all the sufferings eliminated once for all permanently. Just to complete the exposition in this side, what is that avidya in yoga? Simply put, human beings made up of two parts. One is matter and one is consciousness. The matter part in us is the body and the mind. The body is gross matter, the mind is subtle matter. This probably for students of psychology who are present today on the screen, this is probably the most important distinction between Western psychology and Indian psychology. In Indian psychology, mind is also matter. Normally, in Western philosophy, Western psychology, we make a distinction between mind and matter. What is not material is mental. What is not mind is matter. But in Indian philosophy, mind is also matter. The body is gross matter. The mind is subtle matter. Sthula Sharira and Sukshma Sharira. So we are made up of two parts, matter and consciousness. Matter is the body and the mind. And consciousness, of course, we are all conscious. We don't require proofs for our consciousness because it is self-evident. Self-evidence in quotes. Yeah. You cannot ask a person who comes to you, give me proof that you are living. Because his life he's living is self-evident. Yeah. So two parts in us. The body matter on one side, body mind on one side, consciousness on the other side. Now Sankhya says, out of these two parts, who am I? The basic question of Indian philosophy. What is my reality? And it asserts that that which is real is always permanent, ipso facto. Permanent, eternal, unchanging, immutable. If you apply that definition for reality, then the body and the mind are not real because they are all the time changing. You don't have to go so far. If you are a little bit familiar with Sankhya philosophy, matter is made up of three gunas and the gunas are continuously changing. So the body and the mind are continuously changing. They do not come under the definition of reality. So if I am not the body and the mind in reality, then the only other part in me is consciousness. So Sankhya comes to the definition, conclusion, that my reality, or the answer to the question, who am I, is I am that pure consciousness. If that is the case, what is ignorance? Ignorance is not realizing that I am the Purusha or the consciousness, or to use Vedantic terms, Atman or Brahman. Identifying with the body and the mind as reality is the cause of all my sufferings. Very clear. When I identify with the body, this is what we do when the body grows old. I say, I am growing old. When the body falls sick, I say, I am falling sick. Sankhya will say, you are neither growing old nor falling sick. It is your body which is growing old, body which is falling sick. Similarly, when the mind is sad, you say, I am sad. Mind is depressed, you say, I am depressed. No, you are neither depressed nor sad nor happy. Your mind is sad, depressed, or happy. Your identification with the body and the mind makes you appropriate everything that happens to the body and mind as if it is happening to you, and that is your sufferings. This is the perfect diagnosis of dukkha. And accordingly, if that is the perfect diagnosis, what is the remedy? Very clear. Remedy is disidentify. How do you disidentify? No surgery as yet devised to remove consciousness from the body and the mind. That disidentification of consciousness from the body and the mind is called awareness, is called mindfulness, to use a stylish term of modern times. That disidentification is awareness. So I can put a statement without playing upon words. When you are angry, if you are aware you are angry, you are no longer angry. I'm not playing upon words. When I am angry, I do the damage, scream, abuse, shout, hit, and then repent. I should not have got angry. But the question is, at the time when you are angry, where were you? I'm asking the question, at the time when you are angry, you are not aware you are angry. If you are aware you are angry, at the time when you are angry, you are no longer angry. This probably is the most beautiful therapy for mental illness or mental afflictions. Whenever we are sad, look at sadness as if it is sadness of somebody else, because you are not the mind. When the mind is sad, if you are aware the mind is sad, the sadness does not have that force or grip upon you. This is what happens when a first-time mother gets angry with a tiny tot who is playing mischief, and the mother shows, I'm angry, and tries to correct the child. That anger of the mother never disturbs her, because she's aware that her anger is necessary to correct the child. But the same mother, when she gets angry with her husband, all hell falls loose, because she has lost her awareness. That awareness is the crux of yogic therapy. Total. Coming back to our topic, this was a brief foray into philosophy, because the topic today required me to go there. Coming back to therapy, the body, the mind, and the consciousness. You have to identify with your consciousness. That identification is called self-realization. That self-realization is what is called as nirvana in Buddhism, moksha in Advaita Vedanta, kaivalya in Jainism and yoga. that identification with your consciousness, being pure consciousness. Patan uses the third sutra, tada drashtu sarupe avasthanam. When the drashtu or the seer is established in its own nature, which is pure consciousness. That happens when chitta vritti nirodha happens, when you remove all the vrittis so that there's no scope for identifying with the mind. The point here, very important point, that identification with the consciousness can happen only after you transcend your body and your mind. You cannot abandon your body and mind and try to identify with the consciousness or reach the state of self-realization. If that was the case, people who commit suicide would have been free of all their sufferings, because suicide is the ultimate abandonment of the body. But by committing suicide, your problems don't go, because according to Indian philosophy, you take birth again and the problems continue. There is no end to the problems. So suicide or abandoning the body cannot solve your problems. We have to transcend the body and the mind to reach the state of consciousness. This transcendence can happen only when the body and the mind are healthy. A sick mind, a sick body cannot become spiritual. You cannot philosophize on an empty stomach or a distracted state of mind or a diseased body. For reaching the state of self-realization, for reaching the state of perfect health, ananda or bliss in Vedanta, you have to transcend the body and the mind, not abandon. That is why Bhagavad Gita says renunciation in the world, not of the world. If you run away from the world, it does not mean you run away from the problem. The problems will keep coming with you, because the problems are the body and the mind which you carry wherever you go. You have to transcend the body and the mind, and that transcendence will happen only when the body and the mind become healthy. Automatically, you see, health or therapy is inbuilt in the darshana. It is an inherent part of yoga philosophy. Having considered from yogic darshanic point of view, come to pure Patanjali Yoga Sutras or Ashtanga of Patanjali, which is propounded by the Yoga Sutras, you will get a still clear picture of holism of the human being towards which yoga caters. If you take the 8 limbs, yamas, niyamas, asanas, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, on a superficial foray into these 8 limbs, a student of yoga will understand these 8 limbs represent 8 practices. Yamas are restraints or observances as regards your interpersonal relationships. It represents your social dimension of personality. Ahimsa, Satya, Aste, Brahmacharya, Parigraha, the 5 yamas, deal with your equation with people outside. If you come to niyamas, they are practices which deal only with yourself. They are personal in nature. Shaucha, Santosha, Tapaswadya, Isha, Panidhana. These are practices which deal only with yourself. If you come to asanas, they are predominantly physical. That is why they are more attractive, because the moment you do asanas systematically for a decent period of time, you can see the effect when you stand in front of the mirror and you become happy. It deals with your structure, your anatomy, predominantly. When you come to pranayam, it predominantly deals with your physiology, with your functions, because the prana, the pancha prana and the upapranas, they cater to the functions in the body. And because pranayam has to do with breathing, the lungs connected to the heart, the breathing practices also deal with your mental aspect. Hatha Yoga says, chale vate chalam chittam nischale nischalam bhavit. Invariable connection between the breathing pattern and the state of your mind. To control the mind, you have to control the breathing. So pranayam practices dealing with physiological and mental aspect. When you come to pratyahar practices are purely mental. You are withdrawing your sense organs from the preoccupation with the external world, and they follow the nature of the mind. Internal orientation. The last three practices, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, put together is called meditation in yoga. It deals with three other dimensions of your personality: the psychological, the intuitive, and the spiritual. So the 8 limbs, the Ashtangas of Patanjali's yoga, actually deal with 8 dimensions of your personality. And you can depict them as 8 concentric circles. The external-most circle representing yamas, and the internal-most circle representing samadhi. The beauty is progress in yoga is a progress from yamas to samadhi. Progress is internal. That is why yoga is called as spiritual. Both yoga and science are in search of reality. But spirituality takes you inwards in your search. Science takes you outwards in your search. Not only this, now I'm coming to the holistic aspect in this Ashtangas. And that holistic aspect is all the 8 dimensions of the personality are interconnected. You cannot just deal with one dimension in isolation. If you deal with that in isolation, then you don't do justice to the essence of yoga. And that is what happens in the external world in the most glaring example, when you do asana practice throughout, in which case asanas are only exercises. Asanas have to take you towards pranayam. That is why the definition of pranayam, Patanjali says, tasmin sati shwasa prashwasya gati vicheda pranayama. Pranayam practices begin on the foundation of asanas. Again, pranayam practices lead you towards dharana. Dharana sucha yogata manasaha. Pranayam practices make you concentrated. You look at this beautiful aspect. For you to reach the state of meditation, all the 5 limbs that comprise Bhairanga yoga, external yoga, all those 5 links have to be in order. I resist myself from saying you have to be perfect in those 5 limbs. You can never be perfect. But you have to take care of those 5 limbs. If you have constant quarrels with people around you, neither can you do asanas properly, neither can you do meditation properly, because the moment you sit down, close your eyes, it is only these faces which will come, which have been quarreling with you. For you to progress higher, you have to ensure that all dimensions of the personality are in sync, are in order. That is the holistic nature. Asanas, if you look at Patanjali, Patanjali says, by doing asanas in the manner prescribed, conflicts from the mind will go. The physical benefits of asanas are byproducts. They are not the end goal. The problem is when you start doing asanas for taking the physical part in isolation, in exclusivity, then you are doing only for the body, which is not yoga. Because Patanjali says every asana that you do is a piece of art, is a tool of meditation. Body will become fit automatically. It's not a big deal when somebody says, I do asanas every day, I'm very healthy. What big deal about it? You can also go for a walk every day or do running or play a game of badminton and then say, okay, I'm fit. Why do you require asanas of yoga? If you do asanas, fitness is a byproduct. Asanas take you towards culturing your mind. Because that period of 15 minutes, 30 minutes on the mat that you do, when you're totally with yourself, totally concentrated, you sharpen the concentration capacity of the mind there. Each of the practices of the 8 limbs are steps on a hierarchical structure. You cannot jump to a higher limb without taking care of the earlier limbs. You cannot jump. On one side, you cannot jump. On the other side, you cannot remain at only one limb and then say, I am doing yoga. There are lots of individuals, particularly senior adults, who take pride in the fact that I have not violated any yama or niyama throughout my life. It's very good. But the question is, where does that take you? One can only say you are a principled person. And lots of time, principled persons are problems for themselves and problems for people around them. The yamas and niyamas, the social discipline, the personal discipline, are not for making you a principled person. You automatically become a principled person. They are meant to ensure that you don't have interpersonal conflicts, you don't have personal conflicts. In the absence of these conflicts, you can proceed higher on the path of yoga. Every limb has a connection to the other limb. You cannot jump directly. Today, meditation, I keep on repeating. Today, meditation has become a fashion. So every individual, without casting aspersions on any person, every individual is tempted to say, I also do meditation half an hour every day. But the question is, yes, half an hour you do, but what do you do the other 23.5 hours? If the other 23.5 hours are not meditative, you cannot do meditation half an hour. That half an hour is torture. Because the moment you sit down with eyes closed, your mind goes into 5th gear. You are providing it so beautiful environment of quietness, AC, and then say the mind will bring out all its rubbish, garbage, which is collected in the 23.5 hours. And then in 5 minutes time, you will say, okay, not today, tomorrow I'll start meditation. The tomorrow will never come. Because for you to be meditation worthy or fit enough to do meditation, you'll have to follow the other steps there. There is no shortcut. You'll have to follow those steps there. You may not be perfect in asana, not be perfect in asanas. We are not talking about perfectibility, perfection. You will have to do. You see this whole holistic thing that yoga is. Every dimension is connected. We are talking about psychosomatic. The problems in the mind coming to the body. Hatha yoga starts with soma, so psychotic. Soma psychic. You do kriyas so that the impurities from the body is removed, in which case your mind is free of conflicts. Because when the body is healthy, the mind becomes happy. When the mind is unhappy, the body becomes unhealthy. It is two-way street. It's not one way. When you are happy, everything around you is nice. You start liking every people around you if you are happy. When you are unhappy, even good things happening around you, people who are having good, good way of behavior, you don't like because your mind is unhappy. Your mental state determines your interpersonal relationships. Your mental state determines how you look at yourself. And how you look at yourself determines your mental state. They are interconnected. All the limbs are interconnected. You cannot take one dimension of human personality and try to deal with it. That is reductionism. That is why when you talk about yoga as holism, we talk about yoga as a lifestyle. Unfortunately, today we have made it a style of life because it's nice to talk over a cup of tea in a social gathering. I also do yoga. No, there is nothing like doing yoga. You're doing yoga formally on the mat or on your seat doing meditation is meant for you to become yogic for the rest of the day. The proper language will be not doing yoga, but being yogic. And that is the holism. The holism of yoga spreads to the 24 hours of the day. It spreads to every activity that you do. It spreads to the way how you talk, how you deal with people. Because yoga is not pertaining to one small dimension of your personality or one small practice. It is holistic. It takes care of your total personality, your total 24 hours. That is why you look at the definition. Patanjali says, Satu Dirgha Kala Nairantarya Sakkara Sevito Drudabhumi. Yoga gets established on firm grounds when you do it for a long period of time. The second is very important. Nairantarya, when there is no break. For your asana practice, there is always a break. For pranayama practice, there is always a break. Then what is this without break Patanjali is talking about? This is your lifestyle for which there is no break there. This is your capacity of concentration, which does not require any break. Yoga is not a part-time activity. It is a holistic activity, taking total stock of your body, mind, soul, and total time and total walk of life wherever you are. It deals with totality. It is holistic in nature. I am coming to the next part, and that is the therapy in yoga or yoga therapy also is holistic in a way. Because, as I mentioned in the beginning, therapy has 4 dimensions to it. One dimension is the preventive part. Second dimension is the curing part. Third dimension is the healing part. Fourth dimension is the transformative part. In ancient times, in ancient India, in Indian culture, yoga is more of a preventive discipline. Even today in the villages, when you go, you will see people taking a small vessel of water early morning, okay, and then drinking and then putting fingers in the mouth and doing dhauti. They don't know this is dhauti. Only in the cities we are sophisticated and say this is one kriya of yoga called dhauti. They do that every day. They do that every day and remove all the acidity, whatever is there. They do dhauti regularly. These kriyas are becoming a part of your lifestyle. And when they become, whether it is kriyas or asanas or pranayam or mudras, bandhas, mantra chanting, meditation, relaxation practices, when they become a part of your lifestyle, there is no question of falling sick. In which case, there is no scope for curing or therapy, no necessity at all. It is preventive discipline. You practice yoga, don't fall sick, medicine is not necessary, no therapy necessary. And in that sense, it is not only preventive, it is also preservative and promotive. It preserves your health and promotes good health, because continuously when you do, you get established in good health. Add to these practices of yoga the other 2-3 elements as popularized by Bhagavad Gita. Your ahara, the yogic diet, with ahara what we talk about, sattvic diet. Add to that a bit of relaxation, Add to that a good measure of rest and relaxation, nidra. And finally, optimum exertion, energy expenditure. You have a good formula of a beautiful lifestyle which is preventive of ill health, physical and mental. A total lifestyle. You just have to take care of these 4 or 5 parts. Do the practices regularly. Ensure your diet is sattvic or yogic diet. Give some scope for entertainment to your mind. Take rest properly and exert optimum exertion necessary. Sweating out necessary, optimum. With these 3-4 elements put there, you have an unbeatable lifestyle which keeps therapy away, not necessary of any therapy. So the first part is the preventive discipline, which actually was the case as regards yoga in ancient India. The next part of therapy is what yoga today is most popular for, the curing part. Hatha Yoga texts talk about practices and the specific ailments towards which these practices are directed. In all the 22,000 sessions of yoga that I have taken, I repeat, I have yet to come across a person who comes to me for doing yoga for attaining to Kaivalya or Moksha. No, not yet. Most of them come for getting some benefit as regards some illness in body or mind. That is the first step into yoga. And it is not even so simple. They have tried all alternate therapies everywhere else, and they just make an attempt saying, chalo ye dekh lete, isme kuch hai kya? Let me try this also. Just as a tentative step, they come into yoga to get free from some small ailment which is there. For such people, I always say, yoga is a supermarket. You are going to the supermarket for buying a pin. There is a plane available. Why do you go to yoga for hypertension or obesity? These small pins in life. In the supermarket of yoga, a plane is available. We don't realize we are coming only for small things. But the most beautiful part is the first step into yoga is the last step, because they never go back. When they start getting the benefits of yoga, they remain in yoga. But the first step is always for therapy. Some problem I have, can I get some relief in this problem? Here we have to be careful. As therapists, as teachers, because today, and this is a point I made, the first point that I made in the beginning of this session. Today, you have the Google doctor. You just key in any ailment and say yoga therapy for this ailment. It will give you a host of practices which go towards that. You have to be careful, and it's not only careful. The only way out is for you to practice those practices and then see whether their efficacy is there or not. Otherwise, you can take from the Google and just go. You are doing the job of a postman. And actually, it is so confusing because there are so many. For one ailment, you will find 5 best practices for hypertension, 10 best kriyas, 5 breathing practices, 5. I mean, they may be running contrary to each other because these are just put by people there. Unless and until a therapist practices those practices, gets the experience, the benefits of those practices, he or she cannot prescribe them as therapeutic practices. You have to go through yourself. This is, yoga is an experiential science. It's not intellectual. After having experience, you can intellectualize. But before having experience, you cannot intellectualize. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or Hatha Yoga textbooks cannot be read by the head. It has to be read by the heart. You have to experience it for knowing what they're talking about. So, as far as therapy is concerned, The popularity of yoga today is due to the second dimension of therapy called curing. Number of practices. And one can tell with assurance, yogic practices can bring about miraculous cures. Miraculous cures. No two things about it. The question is how deep you are in your practices, how many nuances you know of the practices, how many modifications, variations you know of the practices to suit the person who comes to you. Yoga is not one size fit all system. And since I'm on therapy, the paradox in yoga, if you take therapy from the textbooks, just pick it up from there, that the paradox is the Hatha Yoga textbook may say that this practice is very good for your back. And let me tell you, when you have back problems, you cannot do this practice. Because what the Hatha Yoga text talks about is when you do that practice, your back will become strong. But when your back is having a problem, you cannot do those practice. This is where the therapist comes into the picture, where he or she is able to modify the practice. He is able to bring about variations in the practice, suiting the constitution of the person concerned, suiting the present status, psychophysiological status of the person, and then prescribe those practices. It is not a postman's job. Okay, look, this practice is very good for back problems. Hatha Yoga says that, do it. No, you will cause damage, harm more. You have to go through the entire process of seeing when, how, what, whom that practice applies. The next dimension of therapy is what I refer to as healing. As of date, only the first two dimensions are tapped, the preventive dimension and the curing dimension. The next two dimensions are yet to be tapped in full. Yoga holds tremendous promise in these next two parts. When I say healing, the third part, I am referring to situations where the ailment that the person is suffering from has got no remedy. It's incurable. Take, for example, fourth stage of cancer, terminal ailment. In these cases, we know we'll be doing disservice to yoga if we say yoga can cure fourth stage of cancer. No. Yoga, like any therapy, has its own limitations. In these situations, incurable diseases, terminal ailments, yoga can provide a lot to the person in the form of healing, which is empowering the person emotionally to bear his or her pain or sufferings. This is very, very crucial because yoga has tremendous potential as regards counseling. Not only empowering the person emotionally, but also counseling through which you can influence the outlook of the person towards life and death. And in the process, enable the person to bear the sufferings of what he or she is going through in the most optimum manner. Yoga has got tremendous promise because one of the reasons why we say yoga is holistic is yoga is holistic when the term yoga is understood not only as yoga practices, but also as yoga philosophy. Yoga is holistic. Unfortunately, today in therapy, we use only yoga practices. But using yoga practice for therapy is only half therapy. In fact, No therapy can happen if only yoga practices are used. Yes, you can give immediate relief to the person. High blood pressure, person comes to you. Yes, do shavasana, do left nostril breathing, do cooling, tranquilizing practices. Yes, BP will come down, definitely. But you have not yet dealt with the cause of the BP. The moment the effect of the practices go, the BP will go up again. For dealing with the cause of the BP, you have to go to the lifestyle of the person. And when you go to the lifestyle, that is where the outlook towards life has to be affected. That is where it has to be influenced. Unfortunately, today, in the times that we are living, we want to have the cake and eat it too. We don't want to make any change in our lifestyle and at the same time not have any ailments. How is it possible? No employer will give you a high pay packet without giving you stress. Because it is paradoxical. The interests are conflicting there. So if my desires go on increasing, I cannot say my desires should increase. I want more and more things, but I don't want stress. How is it possible? It is not possible. You have to question, you have to look into the fact, what is happening to me, from where stress is coming? Because that stress is built up in the outlook that you have towards life. What do you want out of life? If you don't address that question, no practices can give permanent remedy. They will give you temporary relief. If my back is hurting, which is postural, if I don't correct my posture, howsoever practices I do, my back will never get okay. Yes, practice will give you relief, but I have to correct my posture, which is long term, which is the lifestyle change that I'm doing. Yoga, since it has got value connotation in it, since it has got meaning of life part in it, since it has got outlook towards it, towards life, or built into yoga philosophy, a therapist in yoga can use all these aspects for counseling. And that counseling can go a long, long way in healing the person who is suffering from some incurable disease. Why incurable disease? Look at also a person suffering, having lost a near and dear one. No remedy can bring back the person who has passed away. But healing can happen when you counsel this person, okay, how do I bear this loss that I'm going through? Or some memory of a past event which is still disturbing. How do I take an approach to that? How do I take an outlook towards that so that it no longer disturbs me? Yoga has got tremendous promise here. It is there in yogic counseling, yogic philosophy, approach to life. The last part of yoga therapy, fourth dimension. This is, if I use the phrase raison d'etre, the reason of yoga, essence of yoga. This fourth dimension is what we talk about as transformation. The capacity of yoga as a therapy to transform the practitioner, the teacher, the therapist, and the patient. What is this transformation? Even a physically and a mentally healthy person, even a highly educated person, even an affluent person is caught in the maze of life, entangled, because he or she has yet not answered the question, who am I? What do I want out of life? And in the absence of answering that, each one of us is groping in the dark, getting involved in one or the other rat race, temporarily feeling happy, most of the time feeling sad, irrespective of our education, our affluence, whatever it be. Yoga actually is meant for bringing about transformation. And we must distinguish between the terms transformation and change. When A changes to B, there is all the time possibility for B to become A again. I go to the gym, do weight training, my biceps and triceps bulge, grow. I feel happy in front of the mirror. But the moment I give up the training in the gym for 10-15 days, these muscles come back with a vengeance. It's only a change. Because A has changed to B, B has changed to A again. Transformation is when A changes to B, there is no possibility for B to become A again. A caterpillar transforms into a butterfly. The butterfly can never become caterpillar again. This power of transformation is the essence of yoga. This is the ultimate goal of yoga. This transformation is possible only when that avidya or ignorance that I spoke in the beginning of the session is removed. And not removed as a flash of experience, but removed and we are firmly entrenched in that absence of avidya. That capacity of transformation is the possibility of yoga. And paradoxically, this is more so for educated people. This is more so for healthy people, because only when you are physically and mentally healthy, there is a possibility of transformation. Otherwise, Patanjali says, Vyadhi or physical ailment is the first obstacle on the path of yoga. You have to first become physically and mentally healthy for you to go to the zone of transformation. This transformation is the transformation from the human to the divine, from the empirical to the spiritual, where from instinct to intellect, we make a transformation. We are making a transformation from the animal to the human. When from intellect to intuition, we make the transformation. It is from the human to the divine. That possibility, that promise is inbuilt in yoga. That is the purpose of yoga, actually. So yoga has, as a therapy, yoga is holistic. All the four dimensions that I spoke about, preventive, curative, healing, and transformative, all the four dimensions of therapy are present in yoga therapy. And now you will see that a practitioner, a teacher, a therapist has to first apply all these four dimensions of therapy on himself or herself. Then only is capable of providing therapeutic services to the external world. You have to first become your own therapist. And the advantage in yoga is at every step, there are practices given how you can bring about success in these four dimensions of therapy. Follow yamas, ensure interpersonal relations are fine. Follow niyamas, be happy with yourself as a person. Follow asanas, practice asanas, be healthy physically. Do pranayam practices, both hemispheres of the brain equalized, harmonized, calm and peaceful, capable of concentration. Do meditation practices, do. Get a taste of going to the no mind state. And then carry that experience in day-to-day life. Be meditative rather than doing meditation. All four dimensions are present. Only when a yoga therapist becomes his or her own therapist, in the right sense of the term, he or she is capable of doing therapy for outside people. You cannot intellectually learn textbooks of yoga and then say, okay, look, I can practice therapy. Not possible. You have to first practice, get convinced. That conviction has to come out when you're doing therapy, when you're teaching, when you're imparting yoga. This is the most beautiful part and the most difficult part. Most difficult part. Because either in the process of teaching or in the process of therapy, we forget our own practices and then easily reach a plateau. Plateaus are reminders in life that your growth has stopped. Growth can happen only by practicing. Your sadhana, you are going through the experience of yoga, very, very essential for you to impart either in your teaching or in your therapy what you have gone through. You are your own therapist, holistic therapist, not simple therapist. Holistic therapist, why? 5 minutes more, then I will close my session. Holistic because we are taking the individual. Mark this word individual. This word individual is coming from that which is undivided, whole. An individual is always a whole. It is not divided. In yoga, there is no eulogy. There is no praise for so-called sick genius or for any lopsided personality. Okay, intellectually my IQ is very high, but emotionally I'm a kid. Or emotionally I'm very, very strong, but IQ is very weak. This doesn't happen in yoga. The picture of yoga practitioner is rounded development, socially amicable, physically healthy, emotionally well-grounded, intellectually sharp, totally meditative. It's a total holistic development, rounded development of personality in yoga, because yoga is holism per se. Okay, I will stop my presentation here. If you have any questions, 1 or 2 questions we can take, or I can give the mic to Shivani ji. She's there. I have stretched your concentration capacity for 1 hour 15 minutes. Present day concentration, science says, is 5 to 6 minutes. With all the gadgets available with you, 5 to 6 minutes is maximum concentration. 30 years, 40 years back, when we were in school and colleges, it was 45 minutes. So lectures and classes were for 45 minutes. But today, externally, scientifically, technologically, we have developed. But internally, we have depreciated, we have gone down. As a person, our value has gone down, but our model of mobile phone has become more and more sophisticated. Yes, Shivani.
I think, sir, the next workshop should be life without mobile phone.
Yeah. Yes. Digital holiday.
Thank you, sir. It was such an enlightening session. And I would say that yoga is truly an experiential science and it works differently for every individual. What it works for me, not necessarily works for other 45 participants here. So the formula is to live a yogic lifestyle, to live a life on and off the yoga mat that has continuous transformation, that has continuous evolution. So I request now from our participants, if you have any questions, please unmute yourself and ask.
Hello, sir.
Yes, who is that?
Sir, what is the yogic technique for schizophrenia disease?
जी सुनाई नहीं दे रहा है बराबर से.
What is the yogic technique for schizophrenia disease?
Yeah.
What did I hear, Shivani? What is the?
Sir, yogic technique for schizophrenic disease.
This is actually the topic of my lecture, that there is no ready-made tablet for schizophrenia. This is actually what we have been discussing. That if a person of schizophrenia comes, first of all, since you have asked me this question, I'll take 2 minutes. Schizophrenia is an example of psychosis. Yoga deals with advantage in all neurosis ailments, not psychosis ailments. Because in the first place, for you to do yoga practices, you have to be in a proper framework of mind. And in case of personality disorders like schizophrenia, the person has to first appreciate what practice have to be done, get convinced, and then do. So you have to be very careful in what stage. If the person is going through an episode of schizophrenia, no practice of yoga can be given or administered to that person. The second point is, in yoga, there is no one-to-one therapy, that I have this problem, do this practice. In yoga, always therapy is a basket of practices. Some practice of asanas, some of pranayam, some of mudras, bandhas, some kriyas, and most of all, prescriptions for how do you spend your day. What do you do in the day? And particularly in the case of schizophrenia, also in the case of neurotic ailments, most of the time, these ailments are conclusions of habit patterns having gone wrong. Small habit patterns, when they go wrong in the first place, they are not corrected. So they go on wrong, repeatedly, they go on wrong. And at the end, it is either a neurotic or a psychotic ailment. So if you have to correct that, you have to go back to the time when it started. You require a lot of counseling when the person is okay. And if you have to cut short what I'm saying, if you ask me one therapeutic measure for whether it is schizophrenia or any personality disorder or any neurotic disorder, there is only one surefire method, treatment, and that is love. Nothing else. Your love will be tested, your patience will be tested again and again, again and again. It depends upon how you can keep your, disturbance aside and still go on ensuring that, okay, I will take care of this person. If you are able to do that, you will reach a lot of relief to that person. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions?
That's nice. If there are no questions.
Namaste, sir.
Who is that?
Priyanka here.
Okay.
Namaste, sir. Sir, जैसे आपने बताया कि the yoga mark basically through the therapy और जो कुछ भी आपने कहा, it's ultimately towards the moksha. So if we say that we are into this, being an instructor, also learning, and the main goal would be towards moksha only, personally, then as an instructor, how do I apply this to my life basically? Like I am instructing a class, at the same time I'm learning, but my personal goal, my sadhana is towards moksha. तो मैं इसे कैसे connect करूँ कि is it fine to continue with my teachings or is it not?
This is a contradiction which is very superficial, because you as a yoga teacher will always give what the students who are coming to you ask for. You cannot impose upon them moksha. You can give the teachings for what they are coming for, whether it's physical practice, does not matter, but don't lose the essence of what you are teaching. Why are you teaching? And in between give them some gems of why are we doing what we are doing. But in your own practice, pursuing the final goal of yoga and doing the practices of yoga are not contradictory, they are complementary. You have to do the same practices of asanas, pranayam, whatever you are doing, but your goal is towards, whether you term it as, see, when we talk about moksha, kaivalya, these terms sound very big and very far away from us. But if you understand it in very, very empirical terms, what is this moksha or what is this kaivalya, what is nirvana? If I have to give you a very, very short meaning of these terms, then these terms stand for a state where you are free from all your conditionings. There is no conditioning in you at all. So you are not coming from the past. You are in the moment totally. If you are able to keep your conditionings away, these conditionings can be kept away in two ways. When you are experiencing something, experience it totally, be in it totally. The moment you're out of it, it is totally gone. Second, when you are dealing in the present moment, when some memory comes and tries to intervene here, be aware and say, stop, that is past, let me be in the present now. If you are able to be aware and be free from your conditionings, you are on the path to moksha, kaivalya, nirvana, whatever term you use. Because those conditionings, if I put it in jargon word, is samskaras. In day-to-day life, we have to be, every moment we have to be free from conditioning. Don't look at the clock and say it is 10:30, breakfast time. Ask yourself, am I feeling hungry? You're free from a conditioning. When you're talking to some person, do not calculate what he or she is going to talk now. Pay total attention and hear what the person is saying. You may be knowing the person for a lot of time, and you may be knowing ye kya bolega bhi. Stop that mind from coming to those conclusions. Give full justice to the person in the moment now. If you're aware more and more, whether you're doing yoga practices, any practice, day-to-day activities, you are on the path. So there is no contradiction at all. Is it okay, Priyanka?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah.